of romance in Demon Slayer, this guy probably isn't the first person you think of, but he's actually been married 5 times, and all of his wives have mysteriously disappeared except one, Rei Kabutsuji. She's the woman who is standing right next to Muzan when Tanjiro first meets him, and the little girl being held is their child. But a couple theories say that this isn't a normal marriage. See, before being married to Muzan, Rei was actually married to an extremely wealthy man, but in a devastating turn of events, the wealthy husband was mysteriously killed, and shortly after, Rei met Muzan. And to Rei, Muzan was everything she needed in her time of mourning. He was there for her when she cried, and I'm guessing he was also down to help when Rei's child was born. That's right, this kid isn't half demon and half human. It's most likely 100% human and actually the child of Rei and her former husband. The sad part here is that the mysterious death of the husband was actually caused by Muzan. The first Demon Slayer fanbook confirmed that Muzan killed the wealthy husband to take advantage of Rei's money and business. Now, after the scene where Tanjiro first meets Muzan, we don't ever see Rei or her child again, and what most likely happened is that Muzan got rid of them once Tanjiro blew his cover. I'm sure this would pain Tanjiro to hear, but he's kind of the reason those two aren't around anymore. Anyways, we need to talk about Tanjiro and Kanao's spicy relationship, but it didn't start off spicy. In fact, the very first time they met, they didn't even talk to each other. That happened way later in the show when Tanjiro started flirting with Kanao. See, Tanjiro and the boys were about to leave the Butterfly Mansion, so he said goodbye to everybody, including Kanao. But Tanjiro's curiosity was piqued when she flipped a coin to decide whether or not she should respond to his farewell. He asked Kanao why she needed to flip a coin to make decisions, and that's when she revealed that she was the Guinness World Record holder for the most indecisive person ever. Tanjiro pulled a 900 IQ move and tossed the coin. Heads meant she would have to follow her heart for decisions, and tails meant that she could keep on flipping the coin for any future decisions. The coin landed on heads, and this is where the anime started hinting at the future relationship. Look at the moment they're having here. Tanjiro is holding her hands and Kanao's eyes are shining. The moment didn't last long because Tanjiro told her to always follow her heart and then ran off. The next thing he did was fight Gyutaro and Daki, so Kanao didn't see him for a couple weeks. She must have been shocked when he got back though, because he was in a coma for 2 months. And when he woke up, Kanao was waiting and told him how glad she was that he was okay. This is important because before this moment, Kanao literally had 0 emotions. The fact that she could even feel glad is a big step up for her. The next big moment in their relationship happens during the fight between Muzan and all the Demon Slayers. Tanjiro had just been turned into a demon, and Kanao risked her life to inject him with a cure. And while she didn't die, she got severely injured, but I think it was worth it because Tanjiro turned back into a human. And once the battle was over, you can see the couple smile at each other in a very wholesome way. Years after this massive battle against Muzan, Tanjiro and Kanao eventually married each other and started their own family. While I don't know how many kids they had, the manga does show that they had at least 2 great-grandsons. Listen, Tanjiro is a player, so of course Kanao fell in love with him, but her romance was in danger for a bit because this girl also had a huge crush on him. But when Aoi realized that she was competing with Kanao, she decided to go for one of the homies instead and fell in love with Inosuke. But you gotta realize that when Aoi first met Inosuke, she didn't like him at all. While Tanjiro was training to get stronger, Inosuke and Zenitsu were just lounging around and being lazy. So right off the bat, he made a super bad first impression. And that's why Inosuke is the one who fell in love first. See, later in the manga, Aoi scolded Inosuke for stealing snacks and then gave him a tray of food so he wouldn't have to steal anymore. And if you look closely, you can see that Inosuke blushes a little bit while smiling. And I guess Aoi caught feelings shortly after because years later, it was confirmed that Inosuke ended up with her and they had a couple kids. Okay, Tanjiro and Inosuke were able to seal the deal, but how the heck was Zenitsu going to get Nezuko to fall in love with him? Well, he had one simple strategy to make himself irresistible. He went on establishedtitles.com and became a lord. That's right, Zenitsu knew he had no chance with Nezuko unless there was something special about him. So he bought 1 square foot of land on a private estate in Eddleston, Scotland from our sponsor. You might not know this, but according to ancient Scottish custom, any landowners in Scotland are rightfully referred to as lairds, or lords and ladies in English. But just in case becoming a lord wasn't going to be enough for Nezuko, Zenitsu also had a secret weapon up his sleeve. You see, established titles don't just make you a lord, they also plant a tree with every order and work with 2 of the biggest tree planting global charities in the world. These guys have planted over 2 million trees all over the globe, which was definitely going to impress Nezuko. But just in case Nezuko decided to turn him down, Zenitsu could have bounced back and impressed another girl with his new lordship by putting it on his dating profile, credit card, or plane ticket. Can you imagine swiping on a dating app and seeing Lord Zenitsu on there? And that's why I also got 1 square foot of land in Scotland. And the first 200 people who purchase a title pack using my special link will be right next to my plot of land. If enough of us buy title packs in a row, we'll be able to create a whole kingdom of IMOTO. Go to establishedtitles.com/IMOTO to shop their Black Friday sale. Plus, get an additional 10% off on any purchase with code IMOTO and help support the channel. But let's talk about how Zenitsu actually got Nezuko to fall in love. Well, straight from the beginning, his strategy to win over Nezuko was simple. Whether it was chasing her with flowers or overcoming his fear of demons to go help her, Zenitsu was willing to do anything to marry her. He was so in love with Nezuko that he even saw her in his dreams. While asleep on the Mugen train, Zenitsu dreamed of this and this. But with all this attention going on, was Nezuko even interested? Well, it wasn't until she regained the ability to talk that we started seeing Nezuko perhaps being a little bit in love. You see, when she was first turning back into a human, one of the core memories she remembered was of Zenitsu giving her a bouquet of flowers. And when Zenitsu found out that she could talk again, he asked her to marry him, and the flustered look on Nezuko's face gave away that she was in love. So Zenitsu ended up marrying Nezuko, but I think he still gets upset to this day when he sees Tengen's 3 wives. But why does Tengen have multiple partners? Well, he was raised in a family of ninjas called shinobi, and growing up, he was forced to do things that he didn't want to do. One of those things was marrying 3 women, and even though he didn't get to pick who he married, Tengen grew to love his wives with his whole heart because they would support him during his darkest times. For example, Tengen and his siblings were forced to train extremely hard. The training was so rough that 3 of his siblings died, and when the remaining 6 were fully trained, Tengen's dad ordered them to fight each other to the death. Tengen initially followed this order, but after winning 2 fights, he grabbed his wives and fled. It's here that his romance with them began to bloom. See, Tengen felt horrible about what he did to his siblings, so he got into the habit of saying he was a bad person. But whenever his wives heard this, they would comfort him to the best of their abilities. And during the fight in the entertainment arc, you can see just how much his wives love him. When they thought he was going to die, they were all holding on to him and bawling their eyes out. It was only when Nezuko healed Tengen that they started to calm down. Listen, the girls cried their eyes out, but at least Tengen survived, because there's a doomed romance in Demon Slayer that never even got to happen. When Obanai first saw Mitsuri, he instantly fell in love, and this was shocking because up to that point, he had never been interested in women. And after realizing he was in love, Obanai started to do his best to protect Mitsuri. When people called her dumb or an airhead, he would come to her defense. And while that's very honorable, Obanai also had some obsessive tendencies. See, he easily got jealous of other people if they interacted with Mitsuri too much. Tanjiro is a perfect example of this. When Obanai found out that Tanjiro had trained with Mitsuri a little, he forced Tanjiro to work twice as hard while telling him to never talk to Mitsuri again. So we definitely know that Obanai loves Mitsuri, but does she love him back? Well, throughout the story, little hints are given here and there, but there's one scene in Demon Slayer where Mitsuri tells Obanai everything. See, after a battle with Muzan himself, both Mitsuri and Obanai were fatally wounded. Mitsuri had lost both her arms, and Obanai's face was destroyed. Obanai knew his death was near, so he confessed his love for her and told Mitsuri that he loved how she got excited about the smallest things. Obanai told her how messed up his childhood had been, and that being with her made him feel normal. If Mitsuri had rejected him at this point, it would have been really awkward because it's not like either of them could go anywhere. But luckily, that's not what happened, because when she heard Obanai say all these good things, Mitsuri started sobbing and then told him the truth. She said that she loved him! Obanai felt so happy at this point, but the happy moment faded as they both realized they weren't going to live for long. So Mitsuri told him that when they were reborn as humans, he would have to find her and marry her. Obanai replied and said, "Yes, of course, and this time I will make you happy and protect you so that you don't die." And shortly after this, both Obanai and Mitsuri fell silent. That's sad and all, but let's talk about the relationship that 99% of people don't know about. Sanemi and Kanae's extremely secretive romance. Sanemi first met Kanae during a very hard time in his life. His best friend Kumino had just died during a fight with a lower ranked demon, and Sanemi was devastated. He traveled to the Demon Slayer HQ just to yell at Kaguya, the leader of the Corps. He accused Kaguya of not valuing the lives and efforts of the Demon Slayers and of not training the Demon Slayers to be stronger. While Sanemi was yelling, Kanae was standing next to him, looking worried. And when she couldn't bear it anymore, she interrupted and told him that Kaguya cared for the Demon Slayers so much that he actually memorized the names of every single fallen member. This shocked Sanemi into silence, and that's when Kaguya handed him Kumino's last will and testament. Sanemi burst into tears upon opening it, and during this scene, we see Kanae looking extremely worried. But it's not until much later that their love begins to show itself. In the manga, Sanemi goes to the Butterfly Mansion to get his wounds treated. There, Kanae chastises him for getting into a fight when his previous wounds hadn't even been healed yet. As she tends to his injuries, Sanemi thinks that she is being extremely gentle with him and that she has soft and warm hands. In my opinion, this is where he first caught feelings for her. Unfortunately, Kanae didn't make it through her fight with Doma, so Sanemi was never able to share his feelings with her. We do know that he still thinks fondly of her because whenever he sees Kanae's sister, Shinobu, he is always polite and asks her how she's doing. And speaking of Shinobu, what happened to her? Both Kanae and Kanao had lovers. Did she have one too? The answer to this is unfortunately no. However, there is one fan theory that she and Giyu would have been the perfect couple. Let's look at all the evidence. First, in one of the Demon Slayer books, all the Hashira were criticizing Giyu and wanted to get him fired, but Shinobu stepped in and supported him. This is amazing, but it doesn't mean there was romance. She was just being a good friend. Second, when Giyu was interviewed on his feelings for the other Hashira, he mentioned several things about Shinobu. He said that she was hardworking and serious, but also she looked very pale. This might point to him worrying about her health, but it's a big jump in logic. The strongest piece of evidence for any kind of romance between them is Shinobu's famous line when she says, "The moon is beautiful, isn't it?" In Japan, this phrase is used as a subtle way to confess your love for somebody. So either she was actually talking about the moon, or she was trying to let him know how she felt. These romances are great and all, but let's talk about the only demon moon romance in the entire show. See, Akaza's backstory is insane. When he was a human, he used to work at a dojo. The owner of the dojo had an extremely sick daughter, so Akaza began taking care of her. They passed the days talking about fireworks or how they would explore when she got better. 3 years passed and the girl's health only kept getting better. After seeing how devoted Akaza was to the girl, the owner of the dojo not only offered up his position to Akaza, but also his daughter's hand in marriage. Both Akaza and Koyuki, the girl, blushed, and at this point everybody knew just how in love they were. But it wasn't long before disaster struck. The next door neighbor who owned a rivaling dojo had a huge crush on Koyuki, and when he heard that she was going to marry Akaza, he flew into a murderous rage. He summoned a couple members of his dojo to beat up Akaza, but since Akaza is the main character in this story, he had no difficulty defeating all of them, but things were only getting started. One day when Akaza was out of town to visit his father's grave, the jealous neighbor struck again. He thought to himself that if Koyuki wouldn't marry him, nobody would be allowed to marry her. So he secretly poisoned the well where Koyuki and her father lived. When Akaza returned from his father's grave, he sobbed over the passing of his lover, but the grief wasn't enough. He wanted revenge. Akaza went full psycho and killed all 50 members of the rivaling dojo with his bare hands. And just when he was beginning to calm down, Muzan found him and turned him into a demon against his will. Akaza lost all his memories when he became a demon, but little bits and pieces of his lover still floated in his mind from time to time. And when he was eventually defeated by Tanjiro, he was finally reunited with the love of his life, Koyuki. And listen, that's amazing and all, but it's nothing compared to how Tanjiro managed to defeat Akaza. Click this video to see how every demon moon was defeated.